Hey everyone, my name is Josh Lynch. Welcome to this tutorial on creating wrinkles and folds inside of Substance Designer. So in this wrinkles and folds tutorial, we're going to be focusing on creating this tarp material right here. This is just a shot inside of Marmoset. Let me go ahead, before we get into Substance Designer, I kind of want to look at the reference that we have here and talk about breaking it down a little bit and what inspired me to create this. So the main thing that really caught my attention was kind of this horizontal band right here through the middle. I liked the macro folds. I loved the two white bands kind of wrapping from left to right. And around them were these really cool kind of secondary tension folds, if you want to think of it like that. And I really like the contrast between like big eye-rested kind of folds and then like a higher frequency element moving along the horizontal bands. So let's go ahead and jump into Substance Designer. And the first thing we're going to look at is making these kind of big fold shapes. All right, so here we are in Substance Designer. Before we get into the nodes here and the really cool stuff, I wanted to preface the start of this video by saying that a lot of the video tutorials I've done in the past have been like create from scratch. I'm clicking all these settings, dragging everything around. I wanted to try a different approach with you guys, one that I feel like might be a little more relaxed for you as viewers. And that approach is one that I took when I did the ArtStation Masterclass. And it's just kind of more of a detailed walkthrough. I feel like I got a lot of positive feedback on that approach, so I want to continue with it. If you wouldn't mind, please email me after you've watched this. Let me know what you prefer. You've probably seen my older stuff, maybe the ArtStation Masterclass. Just tell me what you think and be honest with me, so that way I know how to cater these tutorials for you guys going forward. All right, thanks so much. All right, let's get into the cool stuff now. So when I'm working on these folds in here, the first thing I want to do is just kind of establish something that feels kind of like the macro folds, right? And these are obviously higher frequency, but we can totally control that. So how I go about this is I just start with a crease node. And you guys know that I'm a really big fan of let's use what's available to us. Very rarely do I go in and go out of my way to make custom effects maps or pixel processors. More power to those people. That's awesome. I just try to use what's available to me so I can iterate and not get bogged down with that process. So what I've got here is a creased node, a scale of 1, just a little bit of disorder and warp intensity. And then the next thing I'm going to do is I'm going to stretch it. So I'm using the Art of Josh Lynch Transform Plus here. You can find that on my Gumroad. I just take the local scale up to 4. And so you can see, like, if we zoom out here a bit on the tiling, I've really just scaled this up on the left and the right. And then the next thing I'm going to do, which is like really cool, my favorite part of this whole process, is I'm taking that and I run this through a directional warp. So I crank this way up. Like you can see, this is a little over 500. I've got the warp angle going straight up. And all that's plugged in here is just a simple linear gradient. I've got the rotation set to 90. And that just kind of takes this and gives us this really beautiful fold kind of on an angle. And the next thing I do, and if you guys have seen any of my other talks, you know I love high pass. So what I'm doing with this high pass right here is the best thing about this is it kind of takes, so you'll notice that there's like a lot of gradient down toward black and a little bit up toward white in here. And this kind of evens all of that out. And we get the essence of what we're after here, right? Which is just these main fold shapes. And so what I want to do with that is use this as an overlay. And that just helps me, I'm just kind of toggling this for you guys. That just helps me kind of pull out some of these shapes, but I'm not blowing anything out. I'm not damaging anything. if I lower the overlay here, you can kind of see what that does in the 3D view, right? So we are, undo back and forth here. So it's pretty nice. If I wanted to expand the radius of this high pass, it's going to start to grab a lot more volume. And if I go left and make it tighter, you can see it's like a lot sharper. So if we double click the high pass, if I go to the right with this, you can see it's grabbing more of that volume. And then if I go left, it's very tight on the details. So it's really up to you. My goal isn't to say to you, hey, this is the final result. I want you guys to play around with the settings, find what works for you, but more importantly, like, just get comfortable with what's at your disposal, right, when you're in here making stuff. And so what I've got right now is I've got this fold running into this switch. And so that's just so we can focus on this upper band right here to start. Or not upper band, upper group of nodes. And so anyway, if I set this to false, I'm going to start to grab these nodes, like all of these right here. So let's go ahead and talk through this area here. But before I do that, I just want to mention a couple of quick things. I should have maybe done this at the beginning, but I have my normal map intensity set pretty high here. I like that. I mean, do what you feel works best for the type of material you're making. I just like the cranked up look. It really grabs a lot of lighting and reacts to the light really well. You'll notice that the lower I go, it's very soft, which that might be cool for some things like maybe a really thin looking like actual cloth. So anyway, I've got the HBAO node here really low on the height depth, like 0.04. I noticed some people have it really cranked up, and that can look cool in here, but that's not what you should be doing. It should be like, this should just be kind of helping, not dictating, right? And then my roughness is just a solid color. Right now I've got it pretty low just so we can see what's going on here easily. You know, I could crank this up, and what we saw from the reference is kind of shiny, you know, but I just, for the purpose of this stage of this tutorial, I'm going to keep it low. And then my base color is just around middle gray, just so we can see what we're doing. Nothing major. All right, so back to these nodes. So you'll notice that we have a problem. Like, we have this really nice tiling from top to bottom here, right? Like, the vertical tiling is fantastic, but we got a little bit of a problem on our left and right. And that's because we're doing this directional warp, right? So, well, actually it's from this, it's from the Transform Plus, right? We're breaking the tiling, and then we're shooting up in this directional warp. So if I come down here, what I'm doing ultimately in the end is I'm using this set of nodes right here to fix the tiling on the left and the right. So what I've got here is I've just got a simple gradient, linear 2, so I get this kind of dome. I do a levels, and I just kind of clamp it down here. Like, you can see kind of what my, actually, let me drag this over a little bit for you guys. Sorry about that. I didn't realize it was kind of squashed there, but I'm just kind of looking at getting a little bit of a gap here for black, and then a little bit of a ramp up to white. I do a little bit of non-uniform blur here. That's just to kind of soften it up, and then I do a subtle warp. Maybe that's actually a little too much now that I look at it, but it's working, and then I blur it. And then what we've got here is I've just got this set to copy. So again, for those of you who are newer to Substance Designer, anything that is plugged into the opacity, the white, is going to affect the foreground or the topmost input, and the black is going to let in the background. So what we've got here is this blur, or I'm sorry, this mask output of this blur node is letting in the original wrinkles we made, and then this setup here is letting in into the background, like on the left and the right. So let's do just a quick run through here. So we've got a crease, much like before, right? And then I just changed the random seed just so it's a little different. I did the same thing here where I used the transform plus to local X. I put it at 4. And then I use a directional warp. And then I use another transform plus and I just kind of scoot it over in global X by -0.5. So what that's doing is that's putting my seam right in the middle. And then I do a little bit of a high pass. And so that seam in the middle doesn't show up in this blend. So I hope that's clear. Really what's happening is it's pretty simple. You got the mask and then you've got the 2 inputs and then it's fixing the tiling for us. So the next part I want to talk about is we've got this non-uniform blur. So if you guys have heard me give any of my recent kind of talks, like I love this node. This node, I wish I knew about this node a lot sooner in my use of Substance Designer. And yeah, it's great. So what we're doing here is we're just kind of softening up these wrinkles. So if I lower this a little bit, kind of see, should be happening. Oh, so my switch is off. There we go. So I had to set it to false. Sorry about that. So what it's doing is it's, there we go. So if I lower this, you can see that it makes these folds really sharp. But if I raise the intensity, I get these really nice soft folds. So this can be really nice if you're looking for this type of response. Even with the same set of like nodes set up, you can have something really sharp, or you can get it really cranked up here to something very soft. It's really powerful. I would really recommend checking this node out. Spend a lot of time with it, see what it does. It's really cool. So then I do a little bit of auto levels, and then I just flatten down the histogram range just a bit. I don't think that this is actually very necessary, but I think it's a habit of mine. So what I do is I tend to take my height map, I do an auto levels, and that kind of maximizes my pixel usage. If I look at the histogram, so you could see like here, I'm not using the bottom or the top really. So I take this auto levels, slam it out, and then I kind of narrow it back down. It's really good if you have like little micro details and you want to get them to kind of pop a little bit, you can try to use the auto levels here. All right, cool. So go ahead, and if you need to rewatch this, that's more than fine. Get your macro fold set up, and then the next part, we're gonna just keep adding detail to this. So we've got 4 parts to get through. I'm really excited to be talking to you guys about folds and Substance Designer. So let's keep going. All right, so welcome to part 2 of the Wrinkles and Folds tutorial. I hope you had fun setting up your macro folds. In this portion of the tutorial, what I wanna go over with you is the setup of getting our horizontal white bands established, and talk about shifting some of the macro folds around just so it kind of works better with the bands. So let's go ahead and get into it. I just grouped all of my nodes, like all the nodes from part 1 in here. This is kind of what my height map looks like. Again, don't worry about it matching or anything. Just find your flow and enjoy the process. The first thing I want to do is come up here and create our bands. And you know, I could have done this a number of ways. Like I could have said, oh, I'll make a tile sampler or a tile generator. I'll get 2 of these lines. I'll scale them a certain way. There's no like right or wrong way. I just wanted this. It worked for me. So I've got what it is a shape. I've got the tiling set to 2, and then I can change the size in here, right? So I can go, like I can just make these really thick, or I can make them thin. And for me, like this just worked really well. I'm not going to worry about like exposing parameters on this or anything like that. I just want to get something simple and straightforward. So the next thing I want to do is I want to take these folds and I want to shift them via a directional warp. So you don't see this continuity of the fold going all the way down the front, right? I want a little bit of a break. I feel like that really helps to make it look believable. You'll notice that in our reference, while a lot of these folds are going, they hit the white band and they just slightly shift. It's really cool. And I think that honestly, even in the reference, if it didn't, just to make it look a little less CG, a little bit more varied, you should do that anyway. So I've got these bands, and the next thing I want to try to do is get this random grayscale map, right? So what's interesting is when you use the flood fill, it doesn't like it when things are like going from edge to edge. So what I have to do is basically break it, right? So what I'm doing here is I'm getting our white bands, and then I'm taking a shape and I just scale it down to 0.99 on X. And yeah, just real thin. And then I just do a multiply. And that basically gives me a border on our left and right edge of the canvas, right? And then I take a flood fill, and you can see that that like breaks this up nicely. If I were to plug this in, you can see how like the middle one works, but the top and the, yeah, look at that. Yeah, so it clearly is not good, right? But you can see that as soon as I hook this up properly, we get this nice gradient. And so I take the flood fill and I get a flood fill to random grayscale. And one thing I like to do when I'm working in here is I like to take the distance node. Let me actually drop in a little helper here for us to see the connection. So I take the black and white mask, I plug it into the top of the distance, and I take our flood fill to random grayscale, and I plug that in, and I set it to grayscale, I set it to only source, and I just maximize the distance here. In this case, there's really no reason to just leave it at 2 or something. Just crank it over. It doesn't cost anything. And then here what I've done is I just gave a slight bit of contrast. I think at the time I wasn't happy with just how much the directional warp was shifting things over, so I just cranked it a little bit. I think it, honestly, looking back on it now, it's just it was just a taste thing at the time. I was like, oh, I want a little bit more. Not absolutely necessary. But in the directional warp, what I do is I plug in our macro folds height map, and then I just set it to like 200 and left to right, and it works really well. You know, I can sit here and change the angle on this, and you can see it updating in the 3D view. It's really cool. I love the functionality of this. Like, it just doesn't get any better than this. Like, we're able to see everything really quick, you know? All right. So the next thing I want to do is I'm going to take these bands and I'm going to do a little bit of a bevel on them. I just increase the distance a little bit and I set the smoothing way up. And that just kind of softens it. And then I do another blur here, and that's just to shoot these pixels that stop here kind of more into the black. And what that's going to do for me, let me just hook up a normal map real quick so we can see this a little bit clearer in the 2D view. Wow, I don't want 167. That's not. So we can see, actually, maybe I do want to go a little bit higher. There we go. This is just for the viewing purposes, right? But if I were to take the blur away, you can see we get this really sharp line, and that's not what I want. I want a little bit of more of a soft transition. And so what I'm doing with this non-uniform blur, so again, to recap, we've shifted it so each horizontal chunk basically has its own fold section. And then we're using this to smooth out the pixels to prepare for the white bands to come in here, right? So let me, if I were to just take this away and just go hook this up real quick. like I know our gloss is hooked up too. But you could see I just have the pixels of the height map just smoothed, right? I don't want the band to pick up on all these folds. I want it to be a point where, again, kind of looking at the reference, everything feels a little bit more like if we're looking at it from the side, it's more flat. Not perfectly flat, but more flat, right? So let me undo back here. Okay, cool. So let's keep moving along. What I've got up here is I've got our white band height map, and it's just real thin in the range here, right? And then what I'm doing, it's almost negligible. You'll notice a lot of this stuff, I keep saying it's negligible, it's super subtle. But you'll notice here, like I just have a little bit of, let me kind of turn this off actually. Kind of where the thin line of that band is, I just have a little bit of knock. It's just a little bit of like edge, something just so it's not all the same. But what I've got here is I took a grunge map, I rotated it, I blurred it a little bit with a regular blur just at 4, and then I did a slope blur real low, like 0.01. And again, it's a super subtle kind of detail here. Let me go ahead and take our bumpies off. We'll go over those next, don't worry. But now what I'm doing is I'm taking this and I'm doing an add sub. So what am I doing here? Like, why am I doing this? Why don't I just do an add linear dodge? What I found when I did the add linear dodge approach was it constantly looked too thick in the normal map. So what I decided to do was flatten this out and then use the height map here and kind of do an add sub. So I'm shifting the white band up and down to better match the underlying height map. And then I set this to max lighten. So you'll notice that as it blends in, it's super thin, like it's almost not noticeable. And that gives me that really thin kind of line right here. All right, so let's talk about the little bits of bumpies here. So let me undo back until we get these guys turned on. So when I looked at the reference, it's kind of blurry, right? And I just wanted something that looked cool, right? So I kind of was like, what would feel something that like kind of felt textural, but I could sell the age of it through the height map alone and the normal map detail, right? Like you could feel that at some point all of these were uniform and then they were worn over time. So if I go and I just plug straight out of the tile sampler here into this non-uniform blur, actually my bad, I've tiled it a bunch. If we just go here before the slope blur, you could see this is what they all look like, right? If they just, you went to like the construction store, well, whatever, like Home Depot or Lowe's, and you can see like the difference. So now this looks like it's aged, right? And that's one thing for me is really important, you know, to try to sell when I'm making any material is a little bit of storytelling, while trying to keep this friendly for like endlessly tiling, things like that. So this is a great moment here to say to the viewer of the material, like in the scene, in a movie, in a game, whatever, hey, this is kind of old because there's wear on these bumps. So how did I do that? So I took this tile sampler and I just made a bunch of disc shapes. I have like the X and Y amount around 190. There's nothing crazy going on in here. I got a little bit of scale random. The biggest thing that I've done is I've got a color random at 0.5. So the reason I did that is when I come in here to this non-uniform blur, you'll notice that if I were to, let me just do this real quick. Let me crank these to white. you can see that if I crank this to white, they all like have the same kind of bumpiness, like depth to them, right? But if I go to the other version, you can see some of them are slightly different. They look a little bit more random, right? So I could crank this up even a touch more, like to 0.8. And you can see they change even more. And the more I increase the intensity here, the flatter they get, basically. So like if I were to crank this up, you can see the difference here, right? So anyway, again, I'm really digging the non-uniform blur. I think the thing to touch on here that's making them blur at different strengths is the grayscale, right? So the white is going to blur a lot. The gray is going to blur less. So I do that, and then I do a safe transform. I just tile it twice. So you're probably wondering why didn't I just say put that in here? There's no like real reason other than when I was working on it, I was like, oh, I'll just see what it does when I just do tile it twice and save transform, and it just worked. So I'll do the auto levels here just to maximize that pixel range. And then I do a slope blur. So the slope blur is awesome, right? Like I personally don't try to use it very often, but in this case, it's perfect. What I'm doing is I'm just knocking some of these shapes around, and it does such a damn good job, right? Like they just look worn. It looks supernatural. Supernatural? It looks very natural. And then if I crank it up even more, you can see then some of them look even just almost completely gone. So it's quite nice. Now that's actually kind of cool too, right? So it depends like the level at which you want this to look worn. Okay, so going back into the height map here, all I do with this at this point is I do an add linear dodge, and I keep it like real low, like 0.01. I don't even think you could see it. Let me just do this real quick. Oh. And I don't really care to try to mask it out up here because I know that down here it's going to get masked out anyway when I do the max lighten. So it works out just fine. Okay. So that's pretty much it as far as like the height map goes. So you'll notice that we did the max lighten, right, for our blending. So what that means is we need to get a mask out of this. So all I do when I'm trying to get a mask out of anything I've done a min darken on or a max lighten on is I duplicate the blend, okay? I set it to divide, and I do a histogram scan. What I do is I do 0.001 is pixel perfect. Well, more often than not, it's pretty damn pixel perfect. And so you'll notice that in this case, the larger areas are white and the thin is black. So I want the opposite of that. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to grab these inputs and just hit X, and I'm going to swap them. And that kind of gives us this mask. So that's how I do that. And then here, I'm using this mask, and I'm just blocking in our roughness values, right? So I want something that is fairly shiny on the tarp. And then where the white bands are, I want it not as shiny, right? Something that's more matte. I don't want it to be completely like this because it's not cloth. I felt like what I was trying to make was a synthetic, maybe like a rubber or something. Maybe not rubber, but definitely not cloth. And then I use the same mask to block in my colors. So I just have this blue. I sampled this from a scan that I found of plastic, I think. And then I can't tell you where I got this one from, but what I want to mention about it, I'm pretty sure I got it from another plastic or a cloth. But anyway, what I want to mention is a lot of people, when I see them try to make something that looks white, they go like way up high here. Like that's like snow brightness, right? And so what we want to do is understand that I have this at like around 170, 180, and that's, excuse me, that's pretty damn bright. Like, especially when you get the lighting going on here. Like if I jump back to Marmoset, you can see that this looks more like the ref. It's not perfectly bright, but as soon as I bring this up, it matches our ref closely. And so I just want to mention that, like, when you want something to be bright, it doesn't need to go all the way up to like 210 or something like that. You can have it sit around 170, 180, and once the lighting comes in and hits, that already looks pretty bright, right? And if we want to just check our true specular response here, I can just set this to black and you can see, yeah, like that's really nice, right? So our tarp is pretty shiny, and then our bands are a little bit more matte. Yeah, cool. And I do this a lot, like when I'm working, you'll see a lot of times I'll say, oh, go around like 150 or so, just something middle gray, slightly brighter than middle gray. But what I like to do when I'm checking my roughness values is I set it to black, because a lot of times this gray will fight the glossy response, like the glossiness, the smoothness, the roughness, whatever. It'll fight it. And so I like to take it to black to see truly what the specular response is on the material. So I hope that's helpful somehow. That's how I work anyway. And that's how I work when I'm in engine in production. I look at the full albedo range, then I go into debug and I look at it in gray, like in Unreal, that's like detail lighting, right? And then another thing I like to have when I'm in production is I just take it all black on the diffuse, so I see the specular response, and that helps me read the scene, like, oh, hey, my materials are popping out over here in a good way, or we might have a lack of material, like glossiness contrast, right? So anyway, yeah. So let's go ahead and move on to part 3. Take your time here and just kind of set things up the way you feel is best and have some fun. All right, so I'll see you in part 3. All right, so now that you've got your horizontal white bands added in and your macro folds shifted around, let's talk about adding these really cool high frequency folds and wrinkles in here and get a little bit of surface tooth going on, a little bit of dimpling on the surface of our tarp, right? So let's jump into the graph. And what I've done is I'm dropping all these new nodes in between where our non-uniform blur, where we smooth out the height map for the bands, but before we add the white band in, right? Okay, so what we've got here in order to start creating these higher frequency folds, I'm just grabbing another creased. So you'll notice that I use this a lot. I love this node, right? So we have a scale of 4, and then our warp intensity is at 0.14. The next thing I do is I just do a little bit of slope blur. I think this was a taste thing. I think if we removed it, yeah, it's just kind of a little bit. And then the next thing I do is I do this non-uniform blur. And much like everything else, if I over blur it, you'll notice that it kind of just softens up a little bit. So I wanted a little bit of control. I didn't want it super sharp, so I just kind of touch it up a little bit with some blur. And then, so this is my favorite part right here. So we take all this noise, and then we're going to use the mask from our bands, and we're going to create a bevel. Okay, my distance is like 0.28, right? So I do that, and then I chop out with a subtract from this blend. I chop out the original mask, and that leaves me with this kind of ramp. And so what I want to do now is I want to invert this, right? So what I'm telling the non-uniform blur is to blur the most where the band is and in the center gap between the bands, but blur the least right at the edge of the band and then taper out. So what you can see in our height map is it's doing exactly that, right? So along the band, we have these really cool, like high frequency folds. And then as it gets further out into the center, it gets a little softer. Now what I can do is If I lower the intensity here, you can see that gets kind of nasty looking, right? So this is kind of like where we're deciding how much we want to blur that. And you could do this, right? Like you could easily say, well, there's no influence from these higher frequency folds. But what I found was I kind of liked a little bit. So I left the intensity around 7, and you can see it gives me a little bit of secondary like up and down movement. And what's nice is we can control the distance at which these folds, these high frequency folds, come out away from the bands through the distance of the bevel, right? So I can make it super tight on the edge, or I can like have it come out really far. So there's a lot of flexibility here. And this is pretty straightforward. Like everything, to me anyway, what we've gone over is not super complex, right? And we're just trying to capture the essence of folds. We're not trying to do anything crazy here. We're having a lot of fun in Substance Designer. We're getting in here, we're making wrinkles, right? It's not rocks, it's not cliffs, it's not tiles, it's something cool, right? So let's have some fun with it. And let's actually check out what happens when we mess with this creased node here. If I change the scale of this, if I lower it, you'll notice that I get a different look. And again, it depends on how big this tarp needs to be. So you might want less frequency, you might want more. Like let's see what happens when I put it at 6. See, that kind of looks cool too. I don't think there's really a right or wrong. It's just more of a visual goal. Like what's your end target here, right? Okay. All right, so now that we've got that, oh, there's one more thing. So as we apply this to our height map, sorry, I didn't go over this. So what we're doing here is we're just setting this via overlay, right? So if I lower this down, it's nothing. And if I crank it up, well, then it's pretty heavy, right? And I think like 0.46 is what I arrived at. I'm just doing overlay. But what's nice here is I just, again, right, I'm taking this bevel from before. This is the one that comes off the mask and plugs into our non-uniform blur grayscale, right? So I take this bevel, I'm inverting it, and then I'm blurring it, right? And it kind of allows me, it gives me some fall off, right? Some fall off control, like kind of around the edge here. So you'll notice when I do that, I'm getting a little bit of a nasty bit around that blue. So that's just a matter of like these pixels intersecting when we do the max lighten, but if you don't go too far, then it won't matter. Okay, so let's scoot this over a touch and let's talk about getting some of this really cool bumpy surface detail in here. Now when you look at the reference, it's nondescript, right? It's too blurry. So what I did was I looked at various tarps and I found this like PVC vinyl and I thought, oh, that's cool. You know, like it's kind of a heavier tarp and I kind of like that. So I just went with that and I tried to get a similar pattern, but something that, again, much like these bumpies here on the white band, it kind of showed some age. So as soon as I disconnect this slope blur, you can see everything looks really, really like even, right? Like everything's brand new. So I'm a huge proponent of like, if you're trying to make this even semi lived in, let me try to find a good angle here. Let's give it some wear, right? Let's imagine that this has been placed around. We're going to get some wear on this surface. So what I do is I take this weave generator. This guy, been in here forever. It's really cool. I just do 64 by 64. And I have my shape at 1, my weave at 1, and my gap at 0.35. So it's pretty standard. And then I do a safe transform. So what I'm doing here is I'm keeping the scale at 1, but I'm rotating at 45. And that kind of puts everything on this diagonal bias. And then I take a transform 2D and I just tiled it twice. And that gives me these really fine little bumps, right? And then I do a slope blur. I take a clouds 2, set it to 8, and then I think I just did a transform 2D. And that's where I ended up. I really like it. I think it's pretty simple, pretty straightforward. We could easily invert this. See, now that's interesting too. It's just a different feeling, right? Like if everything was raised up. Yeah, like it's just a different look. So, I mean, that's not too bad. I think if I were to raise this, what I would do in the slope blur is maybe do a max. Yeah, so then it's kind of eating away at the edges of things. But I think the inward little pokes, little pock marks are a little, that's my personal favorite. So yeah, so now that we've got this done, let's roll into the final part of this Wrinkles and Folds tutorial. And this is where we're going to get into the storytelling. We're going to start to look at kind of, you can see here in this reference image, there's some dust collecting in these folds. And I really wanted to like show you guys how to capture that. So let's get in here. All right, so we're in the final part of our Wrinkles and Folds tutorial here. And what I want to do is stay down here for the most part. And we're going to be talking about like adding storytelling elements and just age and wear and just really cool stuff through the roughness and the albedo, right? So the first thing I want to touch on is let's come up here, and I'm outputting from the normal map into a curvature smooth. So let's focus on the roughness. And what I'm going to do is I'm just going to drop like a little bit of a gray into the color here. Okay, great. And so you'll notice that the way I have this is something that's really worn, like it's been out in the elements a lot. And the veneer, well, not the veneer, but the coating or the vinyl is just really wearing off now. There's like, it's been rained on, there's dust collecting. So let's take this, and I'm just going to hook this up node by node so we can see this happening, right? So I'm going to hook up a switch, and what I'm going to, I do this a lot actually when I'm wanting to test something. So I'll use a switch, and so in the top I'm just plugging in our fully detailed, or finished rather, roughness, and then the bottom input is going to be me hooking stuff up as I talk through this. So this is our roughness as it stands, right? Which is what we've kind of been looking at. Don't worry about the band. I know it's very shiny. Let's just focus on the tarp, right? So what I'm building here is I've got a curvature smooth, okay? And I'm using OpenGL format. It's just OpenGL or DirectX is just the inverse of the green channel. Nothing more than that. So what I'm doing is I'm inverting this though, because I want the crevices to be darker. Or I'm sorry, I want the crevices to be light, meaning I want them to be more matte. And the raised parts, I want them to be smoother, therefore shinier. So if I lower this, actually, let me hook this up, my bad. So you could see, if I undo and redo, you can see the crevices become more matte as soon as I hook up this pass. And this is just something that I do a lot. Like, it's real quick. I could lower the overlay, but for me, I was trying to do go for something really worn here. Like I said, out in the elements, in weather. And it's just a good baseline to get things going. So the next thing I want to talk about is using this multi-directional warp node. Now, I mentioned this, I think in my GDC talk, when I talked about Shadow of War. It's on the Algorithmic YouTube channel. What I'll do is in the info section of the tutorial, it's honestly worth it to go in and build this node out and see how it's made. It's really great. I use it all the time for a lot of stuff. So what we're going to do with it is we're going to plug in our curvature smooth into it, which is basically in effect like our height map pretty much, right? Like it's our folds and our band and everything. And what I've got here is a moisture noise, and I've got our clouds, right? And so the way this works is the angle is what you plug, the way I like to use it anyway, is I plug the height map, or in this case our curvature smooth, into the angle. The strength, which is this moisture noise, is how much this is working, and then this is the noise we're distorting. So if I take this and I just change this, let me plug in a creased into this so you could see like how it works. It's really cool. Like you could swap these inputs. Yeah, look at that. Like you get a different look. That's actually really cool too. See, this is my, like doing the roughness is like one of my favorite parts because it's just a lot of storytelling. One thing that I think shows off really well in this is just how everything kind of collects around the folds. And that's the big thing for me with this multi-directional warp is I remember like when I first started using Substance, I would take a grunge and the most I could do was do a directional warp, and that would kind of isolate each element and then allow me to like take a, like whatever it was I was scattering, and it would isolate it to that, and it felt cool. But this is like actually like gripping or conforming to the height map, right? Our actual surface we've constructed, right? So you put a lot of time into the height map, then the height map will work for you, right? So that's one thing I like to say. It's really important. Spend a lot of time on your height map. All right. Anyway, so what we're getting here is this really cool gritty detail that looks like kind of water has come onto it and then dried. Yeah, look at that. Like that's just so gnarly. So I've got the overlay up pretty high here. I just have it cranked. You could do whatever you want. You could lessen it. Another thing you could do is to just take one of these grunges here, and you could plug this into the opacity, and that would break it up even more. But I just went like full on. It's really up to you. But this is a lot of like what I did to get just really believable detail into the roughness. So I've got curvature smooth inverted. I've got this, which looks like really nice gritty wear. Another thing you could do is you could take a sharpen. I don't like to do this a lot, yeah, because see what it does, it just gets noisy. But what you can do is you can just a little bit, and it kind of does some good stuff. So I just want to point that out. So the next thing I'm going to do is I'm just dropping in the roughness for our bands. So again, I'm taking the mask from our height map up here, and I'm hooking this up, right? So now you can see this is nice and separated. Very cool. And then the next part that I'm doing is I'm taking HBAO and I'm plugging it into the Art of Josh Lynch mask generator node here. And then I use the shadow mask. I just kind of come down here to the shadow mask section and I mess with it a little bit. And then I think this levels is kind of redundant. Yeah. Okay, so this is really cool. So I like to take the black and white spots and multiply it on top of that mask. And then I do a little bit of sharpen just to get, yeah. So the reason I did the sharpen here is it kind of so all those little dots in our detail, right, for our pock marks, like our in our height and our normal, they really are going to get called out in here. And then I throw a little bit of levels on just to boost it just a touch. And then I throw this into the roughness. Now, what I'm doing here is I'm setting it to screen And what I'm really calling out here is our crevices, right? But I'm getting these little dots in here. So it's really nice. And you'll notice that because of the way we constructed our height map, a lot of the detail is right along these bands. And then through the middle here is kind of where it's empty. I mean, we still have the macro like hits, but we could throw a mask in here to break that up or whatever, right? So now let's talk about the color. So what I'm going to do is a similar approach to what I had before, or what I did up in the roughness rather, where I'm going to drop a switch in here and I'm going to set this to false so we see the bottom, right, which is just what I'm constructing. So I start with this blue color, okay, and what I'm doing is I'm going all the way up here to the normal map, and I'm taking this grunge map, this vertical one here, grunge map 002, and I like to throw it into this vector warp grayscale. So the vector warp kind of does something similar to the multi-directional warp, and that's kind of why I wanted to show it. Like, they're not the same, but they're similar, and you might need to know that each one exists for different reasons, right? So again, I just like to show a multitude of workflows and nodes, and really focus on building something cool out with you and not say this is so specific and do exactly this. So I'm taking the grunge map 002, I throw it into the vector warp. One thing to pay attention to is the vector format. So I'm in OpenGL normal, like that's what my normal map node is up here. If it was DirectX, you would put this at DirectX, right? So just pay attention to that. If I switch it, you can see it doesn't do that much different, but in some other cases it could be drastically different. So what we're doing here is I just take the intensity up, and that kind of, like, you could see it really bends around it. It's just really cool. So what I get with this is, again, something that takes our folds into account, all of our storytelling into account with how much, like, the high frequency folds we have in here, our shape, everything. And then I convert this to a gradient. So I go from grayscale to gradient. And then what I'm doing here is I'm doing a slight overlay. And what really this is for is purely like interest in the albedo map. I'm not tying this to the roughness at all. My goal is to just say, hey, like, this part is slightly darker, this part is slightly brighter, just to kind of have, well, some interest, right? So it's just not pure blue. Like, if I hook this up, it's not a lot, but again, I think it looks better than nothing. So the next thing I'm going to do is I'm going to drop in our bands, right? So again, I've got my mask here, but up top, what I'm doing is I've got this kind of off-white color we looked at before, but I'm taking a histogram scan version of this multi-directional warp, and I'm just grabbing a little bit of detail, and I'm doing a subtract on this. Now, I would normally not tell you not to do subtract or screen or whatever in your albedo, but because this is so subtle and it looks so close to dirt, I just kept it. You could say, like, okay, I'm going to grab a blend, hook up this uniform color, I'm getting my mask, and then I'm coming in and saying like that, right? And then lower the opacity. It's very similar. So I just want to show that. Okay, so now we've got our albedo coming to life here. We've got a little bit of interest on the blue. We've got some spackle, some age spots on the band. And now, sorry, I'm kind of getting ahead of myself here, getting a little excited. So let me hook that up so we can see it in the 3D view. So this is what we've got going on. And now for our dust collecting. So I just found like a dirt image, I think from like textures.com. I just sampled this brown and I just shifted it a little bit here and there until I got something that felt good to me. But really, what's nice is this looks very close to our reference, right? Like, we've got dust collecting on the folds. So this is looking really cool. And the thing that I like about this is it's subtle. Like if you're looking at the albedo like on its own, it's like, oh, it's very strong. So let's go ahead and hook it up in the final output. But once you see everything kind of hooked up, it's really not that strong, right? So again, just to kind of recap, like if I get the light really glancing across here, if I lower this grungy bit that we had in the gloss, or I'm sorry, in the roughness, you can kind of see like it lets the light breathe a little bit more, but I really wanted that strong, crunchy feeling. That was just what I went for. But yeah, so the other thing I want to mention, the whole time here, we never turned on the displacement map, right? We are looking purely at, you know, the normal roughness, albedo, and the AO. So let's go ahead and actually turn that on. So I'm going materials, default, definitions, physically metallic roughness, and then tessellation. So I'm going to take the tessellation factor up, and then I'm going to take the scale up. So you can see, like, even if I crank this, it's not out of control. Like our height map has a good range to it. But the main reason I wanted to mention this to you about the 3D view is you don't need your height map on for everything. Like you want to check it, you want to know what it's doing, but you shouldn't rely on it for everything. Like your normal map is going to do a large majority of the work, and so that's kind of what you want to leave it to. Like this is just to affect the silhouette, right? And like it's used all the time, like in production. I feel like I repeat this all the time because I keep seeing people say it's not used. Like the last 4 games I worked on used it. So anyway, yeah, so it's good. It's good to check it, but really for this, you can just rely on the normal. And if I jump over to Marmoset, you can see like I don't have it really cranked up very high here. But what's beautiful in Marmoset and what I got really excited about when I was checking my renders is it feels like water collected and the dust, and like you could see these streaks. I just get really excited about it. You can see the bumps really come into life here with the wear. You know, one thing I want to mention too, like if I jump back to substance, is at any point, you know, we can change the random seed on this crease and it's going to kind of give a different result. And if we lower the directional warp intensity, you can see we get a different result even still. So it's pretty cool. Like you can get a lot of really neat stuff going on in here with, I don't want to say with very little effort, but it's not overly complex, right? So anyway, thanks for watching. I hope you've enjoyed this tutorial. I know it's been a long time since I've made one. I really appreciate your guys' patience. Please let me know what you think of this format. If you really like it, if you don't like it, you want something in between, just please let me know. Give me a shout. I'm really eager for the feedback. I hope it's been clear for you and exciting, and I can't wait to see the tarps you guys make. All right, have a good one.